This is Thomas Wayne Riley, and you have found yourself in the American Southwest. Well, Bandy, thank you for coming, sir.
Hey, thank you for having me on the program.
So I have you on because you recently wrote a novella, I guess that's what that's called, Rumorosa, and it was fantastic. My only complaint is that it was too short.
That's very gratifying. I was going for short. Maybe we'll get into that later. I know you're a big reader, and I was flattered that you were able to fit me into your schedule of all the research that you do on the Southwest. That was very cool.
Well, I liked what you were putting out on your Substack, and so I was like, well, this is going to be good. So, and it was. I read it in one day. Would have done it in one sitting had not, life gotten in the way. But it was very good. I'm gonna have to reread it. And in between doing research for the show, I like to read fiction. I think you and I talked about that online. I like to read fiction just to kind of get some of the history out of there. But then you write a book that is historical, recent history, and takes place in the Southwest. So I thought that was great,
Right
actually.
up your alley. Yeah.
Yeah. So what gave you the idea for Rumorosa? I don't want to talk too much about what's in the novel because I don't want to ruin it, but we can hit on some things. But what gave you the idea to write this great kind of new Western almost?
Yeah, thank you for calling it. That's how I see it as a neo Western. Um, I have a kind of a mundane story about this. Last year, about this time of year, my wife and I were buying a car, and we're kind of, I guess, we're not very financially savvy, and we paid cash for the car. And we're in the dealership, and the young guy, we pick out the car, and the young guy who's helping us out, he's about 23 or 24. He's walking us through the financing packages, and I say, well, I just want to pay cash. Can I go get you a cashier's check or whatever? And the guy like gives me a funny look, and he says, I don't normally see that. I'm gonna have to go talk to my manager. And so he goes off to talk about how you pay cash for a car. And I just had this kind of vision of a mysterious man walking into a car dealership with a envelope full of $100 bills and just buying a car off the lot. And that was the inspiration, and it started. I just had the beat of a story in my head, a couple sentences, and I put them on Twitter just to see, just to see what the reaction would be. And a bunch of people liked it and DM'd me and said, "What is this from?" And tell me more about this. Somebody thought it was from No Country for Old Men, which I thought was flattering. Um, and I just kept kind of following the thread. And I grew up on kind of uh, pulp fiction and stories about hired killers and a lot of military thrillers and stuff. So in some ways, I feel like I had been researching this my whole life, but that was the inspiration. It can strike you anywhere.
That is absolutely true. I like that because that scene does play out obviously in the novella in the story. But it's funny how little things like that can just turn into a whole story. And as you're just writing little bits and pieces, you're like, "Oh, that would be good to put in there." So you do, and then from there, you just keep following the thread. I imagine that was similar for you.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the whole write every day kind of philosophy, especially for those of us. I know, like you got a day job, you got kids just like me. Um, you just gotta write every day and see where it leads you. I remember I was listening to a podcast by the author George Saunders, the essayist and short fiction writer, and he said he wrote his first book on the bus. He was like an engineer of some kind, and he was commuting to work, and sometimes he would just get a beat in his head, just like one sentence, and he would take out a legal pad and write it down. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes one sentence will lead you to a next sentence, and yeah, it's surprising.
Not to take away from your novella at all or the talking about yours, but yeah, I watched Lawless, the moonshining movie.
I've heard folks talk about it. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
So when it came out on, like, DVD or whatever, I bought it, and I was sitting in my room watching it, and, like, an idea came to me, and so I kinda wrote a couple sentences down and then continued to watch the movie, and that was 11 years ago, and now my novel is 130,000 words.
Yeah, it'll do that. I am the same way. I've plugged away for years on projects. I have two full length novels. Like for the listeners who aren't familiar with this, the publishing industry kind of considers it a novel when it's beyond uh, 60,000 words, and you'll get to 60,000 words faster than you think if you plug away at it every day for 20 minutes. Um, Rumorosa is about 20,000 words, which is about as long as a screenplay. And I had this kind of, I just an experiment in my head. I figured, people's attention spans are less than they are. Um, maybe people would be interested in a novel that's, uh, it takes about as long to read as it takes to watch a movie. That was kind of what I was going for there.
Oh, I think you nailed it. It was like reading a very good screenplay. I've never read a screenplay actually, but it was written to where every scene was in the novel was a scene in my head, and I was watching a movie, which is why I didn't wanna put it down because
That,
you don't
that's
wanna pause a
awesome.
movie in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's what exactly what I was going for. I kind of erred on the side of leaving stuff out. There's I could definitely have expanded it to a full novel, but um, somebody gave me good advice once. He said, you don't have to explain everything. People will fill in the gaps themselves, and a lot of the need to explain everything is counter to telling a good story. And people, mainly what you want to do is at the end of it, just like you said before, if you wanted more at the end of it, if you wanted it to keep going, then you've done a good job. And whatever gaps you think there are, or whatever places you wish you'd filled in more, that doesn't that doesn't matter. What's really important is telling the story.
And he told it very well. And Rumorosa, the name, comes from the Rumorosa Apaches, which
Who are made up.
yeah.
So Rumorosa is a town across the Arizona border in Mexico, and I just thought it was a cool name. And as you know more than me, there's all these different Apache subgroups, and the the plot of this book hinges around a group of Apaches who are trying to achieve a formal tribal status, and they're called the Rumorosa Apaches. Um, that's the origin there.
I loved it. There was a line like, they're rumored to be Apaches or something.
Yeah, it does. It works on a couple levels, but
Yeah,
I always thought it was a cool. I always thought that town was a cool name.
that is cool. I have walked across the border in Arizona to Mexico. I don't remember the name of the Mexican town now, but it was south of Organ Pipe Cactus,
Okay.
Anyways, it was pretty cool until a black SUV started following me, and and then I literally ran back across the border. I went in the alleys and ran back. I was like, "Okay, this is getting" anyways,
I had a
so
similar experience in Juarez about 20 years ago.
oof,
It's good to go with a guide. I think Mexico is safer than many people imagine, but it's good to go with
mhm,
somebody who knows what they're doing.
yeah. Uh, 11 years ago, I also went parked my truck in, El Paso and walked across the bridge to Juarez and walked around for about a half a day, but I was delirious with a fever, and it was strange. It was a
That's a
strange.
that's a place to really trip you out if you're already
Yeah.
feeling under the weather.
It was a Sunday, and I mean, the squares were packed, and the preachers screaming in Spanish, and I could understand a little bit of it, hell and heaven, and I was like, "Man, this is wild." All I wanted was, like, something to cool me down, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a teeming city.
So there was another question, where exactly in Arizona does the action take place? If you wanna
Well, it's
divulge
kinda
it.
yeah, sure. It's kind of a, composite of a couple different places.
That's what I
I
thought.
think if you were gonna draw a circle in the middle of all the action, it would be Bowie, Arizona, which is off I-10. It's about 2 hours east of Tucson. Um, the White Mountains of Arizona are kind of the idea of the ranch where some of this action takes place would be north of the I-10 in, in the mountains up there. Um, this is southeastern Arizona,
Mhm.
Cochise County. Uh, those are the kinds of places people would look up. It's actually this is something I always lecture people about. I get you know all this, but a lot of people don't. Arizona's topography, we think it's like flat because most people's experience of Arizona is Phoenix, but
Or I-40.
or I-40. Um, but Arizona's really like got a shelf of land around Phoenix, and the further south you go, you're actually getting higher in elevation. Like Bisbee, Arizona, I think the elevation is there is higher than Denver, and that's just a couple miles from the Mexican border. So southeastern Arizona is actually pretty high and pretty cool. Like when I was there recently, I saw standing water on the ground and ponderosa pines down in the foothills. It's not like all saguaro cactuses and stuff down there. It's more like I don't know, like where what people would think of where you're from in New Mexico.
Yeah, I once went to oh my goodness, the Cortez, maybe National Monument or something. It's on the border with Mexico, and this was
Mhm.
in April, and I stayed in around Tombstone, and then I drove down there, and it was
Yeah,
snowing. There were 2 inches of snow on the ground. It was just pouring snow, and I'm staring down into Mexico, and I'm like, "Wow, I just did not really picture Southern Arizona being covered in snow."
I'm gonna get these numbers wrong, but yeah, pretty high in elevation, and actually Tucson, which is much higher, is much lower, further south than Phoenix. I think it's like 800 feet higher in elevation.
Than
So
Phoenix?
than Phoenix, yeah, and it's on average 8 or 10 degrees cooler. So, if people are thinking of going to southeastern Arizona, um, and imagining it's gonna be like the low desert with cactuses and sand, yeah, it's not like that. It
Maybe
surprised you.
maybe in the basins, but yeah, you get up in the ranges. I mean, just go to Chiricahua. I mean, this is
Chiricahua
beautiful up
National
there.
Monument, yeah, that's a beautiful place.
Yeah. Just a couple of weeks ago, right before New Year's Eve, I took, um, 25 down to 10. I was visiting friends in Coolidge,
Okay.
Arizona, and so I drove the 10 over, or no, I should not say that. I drove I-10 over there, and then on the drive back, I went to Globe and then through the White Mountain, Apache Reservation, and I followed the Salt River to the Cibecue Creek because I wanted to go fly fishing, but didn't have any permits, so technically, I did
Okay.
not go fly fishing, if any White Mountain are listening, and it was just beautiful. Like, I've driven that a couple times up in there in those mountains, and that's where I was kinda picturing, some of this action taking place. It was
That's exactly what I had in mind too. Yeah. Now there's not, um I think, people will try to find like if people try to find like an actual ranch that meets all the descriptions of what I put in the book, you won't find it. It's kind of a composite of a couple different places, but um, yeah, you got it.
That yeah, it was great.
I was just looking up Coolidge, Arizona, while you were talking there. Yeah, Arizona is a huge state,
Mhm.
and um, you could spend you could definitely spend 2 weeks just driving around Arizona and not be bored.
Just you spend 2 weeks hanging around the Mogollon Rim and just
Yeah.
see incredible old towns, Mogollon ruins, mountains, lava. Yeah, I mean, oh, Tonto Natural Bridge. I think it's the
Mhm.
biggest natural bridge in the country. I don't remember if it's the world or not, but I mean, it's an incredible place. Arizona is.
One of my favorite parts of Arizona is when you're driving north from there's a place called Morenci that has a humongous copper mine there, and you can drive up through up through the White Mountains, and then if you start bearing north and west towards Phoenix, you get out into open country. You're not in the pine trees anymore, um, and you see these extinct volcanoes. And I forget the name of this place, but it looked like the opening scenes of No Country for Old Men. You know, when they're just doing the voiceover at that Texas landscape. Yeah, there's just a lot of cool variety on that drive. And just an hour before that, you were up in like 9,000 feet elevation, and there were aspen trees with that
Mhm.
looked like Colorado or Idaho or like the Tetons. It's just an amazing state.
It it really is. I love it. I'm glad. I mean, I love New Mexico, but nobody should come here except to visit.
I hear that.
So, I guess, we just kind of started talking about, Rumorosa, but do you wanna tell the audience about yourself as much as you want to?
Sure. I think most people know me from Twitter. Um, I've got an account on Twitter where I share artwork and photographs, mostly about the American West. Um, and I'm from the South originally, but I live out west now, and I like to read, and I try to post a quote every day from whatever I'm reading, and most of what I post about is honestly downstream from what I'm reading. I guess that's my aside. That's my one piece of advice for posting is to read because that's where you get the interesting original stuff that people
I
haven't seen
started doing
before.
that because of you now.
Yeah, it's a good way to like kind of keep a I'm like you, I'm kind of a compulsive note taker. And honestly, that was kind of the inspiration for starting the account was a friend of mine. I would send people, I use Evernote still. I'm probably the last person on earth using Evernote. I would send these people like Evernotes that had 20 notes in them about a book. And somebody said, why don't you start a website to do this? And I didn't think people would be interested in that, but I just started sharing random quotes. And that's kind of how I got started. And I'm also, kind of a hobbyist and writer myself. So that's kind of what I'm all about.
Yeah, I went on a fishing trip with my buddies up in Wisconsin, and I brought, like, 3 books because I didn't plan on fishing all that much, and I was reading these books while they're out on the canoes, and they would come back, and I would just tell them all about what I was reading, and my buddy
Mhm.
goes, "Why don't you start a podcast?" And I was like, "Oh, well, maybe," and now here I am.
It's, um, I don't think everybody, like my father was a big reader. And I always, that's how I got the nucleus of my collection of art books came from him. And he was always reading something. And I don't think everybody needs to be a reader. In fact, I think that in some ways, like if I think there's readers and then there's like tinkerers, people that are like in their garage after work, like building stuff and working on a motorcycle or you know guns or something. And in some ways, like, I think that's a different outlet for the same kind of creative energy as reading and writing, but and that might be more practical. But I think if you are a reader, it's good in this day and age to keep that alive and to share it. And I think that there is some truth to people who are reading slowly are on a different mental wavelength from like following the news compulsively. That's just seems completely toxic to me. So I don't know. I'm just trying to share what I've learned, and I don't think I'm a superior human being for reading a couple books a month, but that's just who I am. And now that I've had kids and I'm older, I've decided I'm just going to be a reader. That's going to be my role.
Mhm. Well, I'm glad you do because I love all of the quotes and I also love the paintings that you post. Recently, since my wife and I moved here, we go to these estate sales,
Mhm.
and because it's the Southwest, every estate sale is just loaded with Charles Russell or Frederick.
I
I'm
bet
just
you have some. Yeah, I bet those people are right on my wavelength.
yeah. I have a stack probably this big of art books that probably cost like $100 from some gift shop, and I
Mhm.
bought for like $8. And I haven't even looked through them all. I got so many of them.
Yeah,
But
I'm looking at my shelf right now. I really encourage people to buy the physical artifacts because they're beautiful, and you would think that all of the art is indexed online, but it's not. And sometimes when it's online, they have they've got the wrong title or the wrong date, and the books the books tell you a lot just in the captions about the background of the piece. But yeah, I
mhm,
love Charlie Russell, and Frederick Remington. Those are kind of the ones that I got interested in first because those are ones my father really liked. Um, but Maynard Dixon seems to be the one that since I started posting, he's the one that I've gotten more into. Um, I think there's certain kinds of art when you post online, you uh, you really do develop a better eye for art, and especially art that's going to work well when people look at it on the phone. Like you're looking for simpler compositions, big shapes, dusk and dawn scenes where there's this dramatic range in colors. Um, I think that's been the surprising thing about sharing on Twitter is you get instant feedback about what people like, and I definitely trust people's feedback. And if a painting gets 1,000 likes, there's something to it. And Maynard Dixon is someone that I think his work works really well on the phone, which probably would have surprised him doing his work in 1930. But sometimes, like a Charlie Russell, I love his paintings, but there's so much detail going on, and the landscape is kind of a dull umber, earth tones, and the cowboys and the horses are dull and brown. And I think we post it on this little screen, and people don't see all the detail, and it kind of underwhelms. Um, it's made me a better art. It's given me a better eye for art posting online.
do you do your own art? Are you a fine art like
Not
painter?
really. I do carry pencils with me out to the desert, and I like to sketch, um, but I haven't shared any of those. They're pretty amateur. One of these days I'll get better at it. I buy art books like tutorial books. Um, I would like to just be a good drawer with pencils. That'd be about as far as I'd go.
I mean, being out there and drawing it, it gives you almost a better appreciation for you start seeing details when you're out in the wild drawing than you do better than you do looking at a photograph or even just looking at it with your own eyes. You're like, "Oh, this is a beautiful landscape." But you
Yeah,
pull out a pen or a pencil and some paper and you start drawing, you're like, "Oh, there's infinite detail here that I can't ever capture."
I agree with that 100%. And I'm of the belief that it's a practical skill. I think hunters and soldiers, people who need to have an eye for terrain, uh, builders. It does sharpen your eye for contour and places to hide, places where you'd be able to run out of. It's just a different way of paying attention to the world around you. And if people listen to the Good Old Boys podcast, like that's something that Bog Beef has talked about a couple times. And yeah, I think most people would agree he is not a froofy art guy. And he himself says, drawing is a technical skill. It used to be taught. Uh, One of the first things that we taught to people who were pursuing like an engineering or a background in the natural sciences. I wish I had learned how to do it, and I think it's still relevant even in the age of AI.
Absolutely. I painted since I was probably 10.
Yeah.
Uh, Now I do oil paints, but not as much as I used to. And my
Well,
wife paints too.
you're right. I've seen your wife's photographs. I'm not surprised that she's a good painter because
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
they kind of overlap.
Hmm. Yeah, she's a good artist. So there's a couple of things that I don't want to forget. I didn't really know who Maynard Dixon was until I did my Everett Ruiz series
Hmm.
because Everett Ruiz stayed with him
I did not know that.
in California because he
Hmm.
was already, um, I think he was already kind of getting established, and he just like went over to his house and was like, "Hey, can I hang out with you?" Back then, 1920s,
Hmm.
and he's like, "I guess." And so I thought that was really cool. So then I was like, "Well, let me look up his paintings," and I love him now.
Do you know if
Just
Ruth
sorry,
started doing the wood blocks after that stay with Dixon? If like Dixon taught him how to do that?
I I can't remember now, but I think so.
Yeah,
I believe
that
so.
would track. Hmm.
And I saw I went to, Scottsdale when I was down in Coolidge, and I saw a Maynard Dixon, and I'm sure I had before, I probably have, but for some reason, this one was beautiful, so I took a photograph of it. Maybe I should post it, but I've come to really appreciate Maynard Dixon as well, and I also saw an Albert Bierstadt, which is like
Those are cool.
yeah,
How
he's
big
one of
was
my
the
favorite.
canvas?
Not as big as, like, the one in Oklahoma City, which is just massive. It
Mhm.
was only about that big. It was, not his normal massive, huge landscape style. It was hold on, let me get I think it was, an plains Indian on horseback spearing a buffalo, but the buffalo was also gorging the horse. It's pretty cool.
I know the painting you're talking about. That's an incredible one.
Yeah, so that was cool to see in person. Um, so you said you're from the South. I am as well. What part of South, if you don't wanna answer, you don't have to, of course.
I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia, which
Okay.
I think I was actually discussing this with my brother recently. I don't know how southern I am now that I've been out of there for a while. He's very southern. I don't know. I think Virginia is like on the way to becoming another California. Um, Virginia Beach is kind of its own thing. It's on the beach and like coastal. The coastal South has always like been a different thing from like the Tidewater's been different from uh, like a place like Atlanta or the Deep South. But I grew up. My father's really interested in Civil War history, so that was a big part of my childhood was going to Civil War battlefields and um, yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I'm steeped in.
Unfortunately, I did not do much of that growing up, and now I love the Civil War, and I'm actually in a reenactment group, so, now I've got the full dress, like, major general jacket, um,
That's
and I've
awesome.
been to every battlefield here in New Mexico and Arizona, but now I need to head back east and
Of which there are more than you would think.
oh, I know, yeah, which is pretty cool.
That's something I want to ask you about. Toward we got to save some time at the end because I'm interested in that. People overlook that part of the Civil
Yeah,
War.
well, you can ask me now, and we can get back into
Well, like I what's always been what's unclear to me is so the Confederacy. I'm drawing in broad strokes here because I don't know as much as you, but the Confederacy invaded New Mexico from Texas, and they got as far as like outside Tucson. Is that right?
Mhm.
Eventually, that was the most, and they were stopped by the Union Army, but it was a group of like kind of irregulars, like they're a Mormon group and some California volunteers. It was not like a crack outfit, and I wonder if they were doing a bunch of stuff up in Missouri at the same time, and strategically, like the Confederacy was never going to be able to capture St. Louis and be able to to hold Missouri. Is such a huge state. I wonder, like, if they had taken people like Joe Shelby and some of those units that were up in uh, Missouri and redeployed them further west, how far do you think they would have been able to get with with like 10,000 men? Would they have been able to march, west towards California? Could we have seen like a Confederacy that had a Pacific port, or was the logistics of that terrain just so inhospitable that they wouldn't have been able to support much larger a unit than what they fielded? What do you think of the counterfactual is there? What's the most logic or most likely counterfactual?
With 10,000 more men, they could have taken Fort Union,
Mhm,
they would have been resupplied, and then they would have marched and met Carleton's California column, probably in southern Arizona, probably would have beat them,
mhm.
and then would have marched on to California where there were 15 to 16,000 rebel, um, what is the word? Partisan,
Mhm.
sympathizers. Maybe
Yeah,
they wouldn't have done anything, maybe they would not have, but I think you meet up and you take LA and you probably go up to San Francisco and that's where they stop because that's a huge port.
right.
The problem was not only were English ships ready to blockade the Pacific, but Russian ships were as well.
Hmm.
Um, they were in talks when they took New Mexico, southern New Mexico. They were in talks with a Mexican state to open a port on the Sea of Cortez. That would have helped get around the blockades, and that would have resupplied them.
There's a guy I'm interested in alternate histories, and there's a guy called Harry Turtledove who wrote Confederate counterfactual. This guy is his politics are real cringe. He's gotten like Stephen King, where
Oh,
if he had just stayed off the internet, like he would be this, you know, kind of admirable older gentleman. But now that he just puts every thought that crosses his mind out on the internet, I don't really pay attention to him much anymore. But he had this idea, the Confederacy. I forget what the point of departure is from our timeline, but I think they win at Second Manassas or something, and they win some big battle in the East, and the end result is an independent Confederacy that has a port on the Sea of Cortez. I think it's Guyamas. Probably butchering those names. That's interesting that you say that has some kind of kernel of truth to it in our own timeline that they were looking at getting that port.
mhm. Oh, I had to say that word a couple times during my series, and I'm pretty
How do you
sure I
pronounce
butchered
it?
it.
How
I
do you
did the
pronounce
same
it?
way.
Yeah,
Guyamas.
I've always
Yeah.
felt that the Southern planter and the Spanish Don are kind of cousins in temperament and outlook, and those 2 would have probably fought each other initially, but then ended up on the same side and intermarrying a lot. If the Confederacy had controlled in some way, like, controlled New Mexico and Arizona, I think you would have seen, like, planters, Cavaliers going west, intermarrying with Spanish families there. Those those 2 are pretty culturally similar, I think.
When they came through Mesilla and then Albuquerque, both towns, all the Dons gave everything they had to the Confederate Army.
Interesting, interesting.
And then when they had the wagons burned at Glorieta Pass, they retreated back down, and when they went to Albuquerque, most of those guys went with them. They got to
Mhm.
Mesilla, most of those families went to Texas with them. So
Really?
they became those New Mexicans became Texans by
Hmm,
1862.
hmm.
And who was left here were mostly the poor New Mexicans. And then when the California column got here, they just fought Navajo and Apache for the next 30 years.
On that, wasn't there uh, the Confederates, they lose at is it Picacho Pass, Picacho Peak? What's the
So they is Picacho Peak.
okay.
It was a very, very small skirmish, and the California column, Carlton's California column men
Mhm.
retreated.
Did
So they bounced.
What
And
was the battle? What was the battle where the Confederates were retreating? Maybe it was New Mexico, maybe it was Arizona, and the Apache Indians were like sniping at them or harassing their supply columns. Am I making this up? It
that
was
it was just the entire time that the rebels were in New Mexico and Arizona, especially the southern part, the Apaches were just causing like immense casualties. More
using it
almost
as
as
Mexican
many.
drug trouble.
Yeah, it was Apaches were big trouble. And when the rebels left, a bunch of Tucson families also went east with the rebels, which the Apache thought they did. They were like, "Oh, look what we did. We forced the white man out of here." And so then when the California column got there, they were just it was not. That's like the Cochise era begins.
Well, I think we're going to have to do a follow-up show on the Confederacy and the Civil War in the extreme West. So
Mhm.
I could talk to you for another hour about that.
Yeah. It was it was fun to do the series. But yeah, we're here to talk about Rumorosa. So, do you have well, I just want to talk about a scene real quick that I really enjoyed. And at first I wasn't sure if it was real, but later of course it was. The I won't even say her name, but the woman in the creek
Mhm.
when he's coming down, it was like, "Oh, this is a great scene." And so I don't know what you could say about that, but I just love that scene. Maybe I just wanted to heap some praise on you.
Oh, I'm glad that I thought that's funny that you picked that scene. I love that scene too. It's, it's kind of a scene that happened to me in real life, um, but, not as dramatic as that, but, I encountered a group of hippies that were obviously, under the influence, of some hallucinogenic substance, and they wanted me to sit with them and watch these, little water skeeters on a creek, and it was kinda funny. It was like being with a large number of adult children, um, and, I almost didn't put that scene in there because I thought people would just be like, "What the hell is this?"
No.
How's this advancing the narrative? But I it was just a funny thing that happened to me in real life, and I figured out a way to work it into the narrative.
Well, I'm glad you did. It was good. And it's kind of with I don't wanna keep bring talking about my novel, but
Mhm.
there's so much of it with my own stories, like, littered in that I wonder if people would be able to pick them out or not, but
Well,
yeah, it's
I think there's something to that. I'm 41, and I feel like a lot of the stuff I wouldn't have been able to write when I was 21 because you just know more about life once you've been married and you've been in been in relationships and had children and the things they say and things your wife says and all the all these little experiences like that's what makes the dialogue real. I have a lot of admiration for people who are able to write books when they're 22 years old that work. Because I wouldn't have had that kind of life experience. Maybe I still don't. I don't know. Like I think as a writer, there's a lot to be said for you get better as you get older because you just have more stuff to work with.
I think that's absolutely correct. Yeah, I've changed my entire ending because it's just not real life.
Yeah, you realize
Life
real
helps.
people aren't going to do this or they
Mhm,
wouldn't talk like this or whatever.
mhm.
And you can use experience. You don't have to have had you don't have to have had a dramatic life to have to use it in a story that you know, that might be about something that's way more adventurous than your normal life. Like,
Mhm.
you'll never know. You never know what will help you as a writer.
That's very true. That's a good point. Um, oh, I had a question. Have you read, Andy Edwards' King of Dogs?
Yes, I have. I read that last year,
Oh,
about 3 or 4 months ago. I thought it was very good.
at the same time I read it, yeah.
Yeah, I actually, and I'll probably repost the some of my quotes from it. That's a very quotable book and a very visual book all around. What's the place where that takes place? Is it
Moab.
Moab? Yeah. There's a lot of cool scenes for people who don't know. It's about a kind of a without rule of law type situation has started in the United States, and it's about a guy who's in Moab to help friend his friend's brother is having a baby, and he has like a landscaping business, and his dying friend says, will you go help my brother out? Which I thought was the best way
Mhm,
to put the chain of events going, because that's a very real thing.
mhm.
Especially, it's a very real thing now. It's scary to have to pick up stakes and move to a part of the country where you don't have family or friends, especially when you got a little baby on the way. And I felt that was very real to say, for him to have said, hey, will you go out to Moab for a little while and just, my brother needs a hand with his business. And then shit hits the fan.
And the lengths that he goes to keep that promise is
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had
There's a lot of
Andy
cool
on
stuff in that book.
back in October, actually.
Oh, you did? I'm going to have to
I
go
did.
back and listen to that episode. I heard him on Pete Quinones, and that
Mhm.
was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's where I was like, "Oh, you know what? This book sounds great. I should go read it." And then I did, and then I messaged him, and then I had him on, and then Jay Burden has had him on like 4 times now.
Hmm. I have
Yeah,
to go
he's
back and
great.
find those.
Yeah, he is great. And, Crowbar was also, in a different way, great.
I haven't read that one yet, just because I have a backlog of books, but a
Mhm.
couple people have said this is right up your alley, Bandy. So
I
I'm
mean,
gonna read it this year.
okay, if you haven't read it, there's a lot of parallels to Rumorosa,
Okay.
and obviously you wrote that either probably at the same time or definitely before Crowbar came out, because that was, like, last month, I think,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Man, this is wow, these are all of these guys, all of our guys are just creating great, like, fiction, and I love it."
I'm
It's
always on the lookout for amateurs that are writing, guys who are writing and self-publishing, because I think I don't know, that's just those are the guys that I'm on their wavelength, and I enjoy writing, reading them online, and when they put out books, I always try to pick them up.
well, I'll send you a copy of mine if it ever gets finished. It's very close.
I'll read it for
And
sure.
then there's John Slaughter's great noir book, Crimson Veil, that was great too.
I haven't heard of that one. Tell me about that.
A guy comes back from, oh shoot, S Korea, maybe? Or
Korea.
World War II, and it takes place in '53, goes
Okay.
back to a small southern town, and just like the mob has taken it over, and so this guy is a private eye, and yeah, it's a basic but awesome private eye book written by one of our guys.
Crimson Veil. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm gonna check that out.
It's very enjoyable as well, and Carl Dahl's got his faction and then faction with the Crusaders.
I've wanted to read that. I know he wrote a book about the Spanish Civil War, and
Mhm.
I've heard him before on other shows, but I know you did a great episode with him about who was that the guy who was like the famous gunfighter.
Charles Askins, Lieutenant
Yeah,
Charles Askins. Yeah, he
that's a
was
very cool
awesome.
show.
He's an awesome guy, uh, and so is Carl Dahl. But, yeah, so do you have this was the question I was gonna ask. Do you have a follow-up?
Um, I ha I started this. It started as one tweet, and then people said, "Keep going with this. I'd like to, where's this from?" And then I wrote a short story, and someone said I would read a whole series about this guy, and so I am working on a follow up. Uh, but I think I don't know if I'm going to have it out this year. I'm going to have to do some field research. I'm working on something else right now. That's kind of if you liked Rumorosa, you'll like this, but it's a totally different setting.
Well, I'm excited. I am excited. Um, that's good news then. Whether it's a follow-up or just more. I just want to read more. Do you have anything, I guess, the stuff on Substack?
Yeah, I actually started writing a book, uh, serializing a book um, last year about a group of American paleontologists working in South America who end up embroiled in a civil war, and that was based on a. I had a colleague who was doing some field work down in Colombia, and she was an anthropologist of some kind, and they weren't digging up gold or anything, but she was doing some field work in this remote part of Colombia, and one of her one of the people they hired as a as a driver or some kind of helper told her, hey, there's a gang that thinks that we have something valuable up here, and we need to be careful. We need to make it clear to them that we're not digging up like Inca gold or something like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. The idea of Americans doing some kind of field work in the middle of a civil war, and so I started writing that book as a serial, and I was putting out like a chapter a month. Um, but what happened was I started writing it with this villain, this Russian mercenary, kind of like a Wagner type mercenary, and he was supposed to be the unapologetic bad guy. And I found out I kind of like this guy better than the Americans, and I don't know how to rework it. And that's about the time that I got um, Rumorosa in my head. So I've kind of put that other story on ice for now, but I may come back to it. But I'm always scribbling something out. I'm always telling some kind of story. And I'll continue to put like short stories on there and that kind of thing.
Good, good. You the way you described the Vietnam cutscenes or like flashbacks, I thought was great and how they tied into the story. I like flashbacks done well can like further the story without saying too much. And I thought you did a really good job with that.
Okay, thank you. That's good feedback. I was worried about that because you're right. I don't like flashbacks in general. I feel like a linear storyline works the best, and keep it simple. That's my philosophy with storytelling. But I had to establish this guy's bona fides as a as an operator. Um, so I work in a scene that it's. Are you familiar with John Plaster's book about the Special Operations Group, the SOG book?
I am not.
It's a good one. I went back through my notes, and it borrows heavily from some pretty terrifying stories of small groups of Green Berets in Laos and Cambodia fighting off like 8 guys versus 200. It's ridiculous stuff they
Yeah.
did.
Are those like the Phoenix guys or
Phoenix was a CIA program
okay.
to assassinate VC. Um, what do you call them? VC
Leader?
collaborators,
Okay.
and they were mostly someone who knows more about this will correct me, and I hope they do. But my understanding is the Phoenix were mainly operating in the Mekong Delta, in the lowlands, in South Vietnam. In the scene, and there is a scene with the shady Phoenix operator in
The long hair?
Rumorosa, the long hair, yeah, who will um, the long hair will make an appearance in future Tanner stories. Um,
Good.
but he's those guys, the Phoenix types were in South Vietnam, and the classic like SOG raid into the Ho Chi Minh Trail, that was in the highlands in Laos or Cambodia or up in the, I forgot what they call it, something something Massif, the highlands of Vietnam.
Yeah. Carl Dahl will know.
Yeah, there's some guys that that's like their main thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a couple like aesthetic accounts where it's all SOG all the time. Those are pretty cool. I follow them.
I think I follow one of them. Yeah, so I guess that was my question. Are you like a Vietnam War history kinda guy, or is that just kind of tangential and
Kind of tangential. I mean, like I'm like any self-respecting guy over 40. I read a lot of American military history, so I I guess I know the basics. But you know, you can't write a story about America after World War II without Vietnam touching it somehow. And I kind of, you know, I hope I do it respectfully, but I think you know the Vietnam War is gotta you if you're gonna write a book about Americans fighting in the 80s, you know, somehow it's going to tie back to Vietnam. And I was kind of inspired by, you know, how in No Country for Old Men, a couple characters uh, have some kind of Vietnam connection. Like Llewellyn Moss was a sniper in Vietnam. Carson Wells was a special forces colonel. One of my pet theories, not substantiated, is that Anton Chigurh was also a Green Beret. Um, that's just how I like to imagine it. So I
I
was
would
kind of
believe it.
yeah, I was kind of as I was writing Rumorosa, I was like, okay, I got a hired killer in 1981. This guy's for sure going to have been in Vietnam.
I mean, even Lethal Weapon, Mel Gibson was Phoenix, and Die Hard, the
I'd
FBI
forgotten
agent.
about that. I forgot about
Yeah, in Die Hard, the FBI agent is like, "Just like Saigon."
that.
And the other one is like, "I was."
Aside, I watched Die Hard on the plane. You know, going back home for Christmas this year, and
Mhm.
it is so good.
I watch it every year.
Yeah, it's and I feel like it's, you know, very Reddit to be like, "Oh, Die Hard is a Christmas movie," and they, you know, quote a few things, but I was like, "This is a legitimately good movie, especially for gun guys."
Mhm. Yeah, I love that movie. I do watch it every December. Yeah.
Yeah,
And Lethal Weapon every December, but
I
it's
grew up
also
that's
kind
kind of
of
my that was kind of my cultural, uh, I grew up on those 80s and 90s or late 80s, early 90s action movies.
me too. Oh, yeah. I'm 38, so I'm just a couple years younger than
About
you.
the same generation, yeah.
Yeah. So I also and the violent cartoons and, I didn't like superhero comic books,
I was
but
never
I
into those either.
liked comic books with, like, action comic books that didn't have heroes, like, I don't even remember. I think, they're somewhere, I'm sure, at my parents' house, but they were like war comic books.
I've seen those, yeah. The there was you get into whatever your dad's into, and for whatever reason, my dad wasn't so into comic books. I got nothing against him, but the comic book I remember the most from the 90s was they made a series of Predator comics where every episode or every book, the Predator was in a different conflict zone. Like there was one where he was in Stalingrad, there was one where he was in the swamps of Louisiana in the 1930s. There was the one I remember the most was he was in London in like the late Victorian period during the time of Jack the Ripper. And it was pretty badass. It was just putting a predator in a different, it was the same formula as the original Predator, you know, putting
Mhm.
a predator in amongst a bunch of soldiers or cops.
I
That was one of
had
the,
one of those. I
yeah.
also had a whole bunch of Alien comic books because I was obsessed with the
Yeah, they had a
movie
whole
Alien.
universe of that.
Yeah, I had every one of those action figures that were like I wish they still made them, but
I went
man.
into that new Predator movie about the Indians,
Mhm. I didn't
with an
see it.
open mind. I thought that was a cool idea. The execution was kind of blah, but I was they should go back to those comic books and
Mhm.
just keep it simple.
Yeah, just you got infinite mine right there that you can just
Yeah.
pull a random one out and be like, "Okay, we got it right here.
Okay, we're gonna
Go
put a
film it."
Predator in Fallujah in like
Mhm.
2004 or something like
Oh,
that.
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the screenplay and the storyboard right there.
Yeah.
So easy.
I don't know how they keep effing it up with these,
Well,
comic books.
I had Rambo Van Halen on, who was in Hollywood for a long time,
Mhm.
and we kinda talked about what happened, and it's girl bosses and everything done by committee.
Yeah, I have a f my cousin is a writer for television, and he says much the same. A lot of it is just politics is a big role, but you can't really make a good thing by committee. I read this biography of Sam Peckinpah last year, and he was a real he was a real loose cannon creatively. He he would go way over budget with his projects. I think the Wild Bunch was like two times what they had budgeted for it, and the only reason that he was successful is that he stuck to his guns creatively, and he occasionally ended up with producers who knew when to rein him in and when to let him go over budget and over schedule. Um, but I don't know. I'm not an expert on film, but it made me think that like the reason there aren't so many good movies is we don't have like wild men like that anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, I recently saw for the first time in decades, The Searchers.
Yeah.
It's it's perfect. It's a perfect film.
Hmm.
Like, but also Andy Edwards was on Jay Burden, I believe, and some of these people like a good producer who can rein you in. I don't know if you heard that, but he was talking about Cormac McCarthy in No Country for Old Men,
Hmm.
and it was like 600 pages long.
Was it?
And
I had no
his
idea.
yeah, his editor read it and was like, "We're taking out every flashback," because he goes into depth on like the Indians in Texas, and he goes back to the uncle's story, and he's like,
Okay.
she's like, "We're taking all of this out," and then he's like, "Okay," and it's like it actually made the novel probably better, even though you would like to read those stories that he wrote. It's like, well, it may have made the novel better because it was quicker, kind of like
This
what
is the
you were
first
saying.
This is the first I'm hearing that. I had known that it was a screenplay and that it was written as a screenplay, and that was, people attributed the success of the film to the fact that, like, in its bones, it was designed to be made into a movie, but I didn't know that it had been 600 pages. I was kind of imagining it came, out of the womb at 250 pages or whatever.
No, apparently his editor was like, "You're cutting it all down to just a linear story, like what you were describing. Just there it
Oh,
is.
man,
You don't need to say everything."
they should have had that lady take a stronger hand on The Passenger. Did you read that?
I have not. No, but I
It's
believe
sad.
he had the same editor for, like, all of his novels,
Hmm,
but I
interesting.
have not read that yet. And then his last one I haven't read either. I should.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. There
It
was the one
starts off,
before that. They're
uh,
related, I think. It's like brother and
yeah,
sister.
the Passenger and Stella Maris
Yes, yeah.
are like twinned, and The Passenger had a really cool premise. Plane crashes, and the plane crashes in the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of New Orleans, and there's supposed to be 10 people on the plane, and the recovery diver goes down, and uh, he can only find 9 people in 9 bodies. It's like, where'd the last guy go? That's a very cool premise,
Yeah.
and I kept waiting for him to explain this mystery because the main character has his father was I think it's implied was like a disgraced physicist on the Manhattan Project, kind of an Oppenheimer type figure, and there's mysterious feds tailing him, and you could go in a lot of cool directions with that, but he never really tied it together.
Dang.
Yeah, I think
I
he
still have
had.
to read it.
Yeah, it's worth reading as a fan, but it's yeah, it didn't really work
Yeah.
in my opinion. Now, uh, it could be that I'm just not smart enough to get it, and I'm humble about that because the man was a genius. And there's people smarter than me. I'm when I quote Cormac McCarthy on my account, it's just out of reverence. It's out of a hope that someone will pick up one of the books rather than me having anything original to say about them. Um, I don't know the stuff. The guy read 100 books about. Um, what's his name? The linguist and philosopher, some obscure philosopher, and he had 100 books about him. And Cormac McCarthy was just a committee of intellect himself. Like he just knew so much. Um, I'm not qualified to review him. Maybe the passenger is just over my head.
He really was. Man, I didn't know that. 100 books from one philosopher. I don't even know if I could read
One book about
one
that
book.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
but that's
sure.
why you read Cormac McCarthy because he read 100, so you're getting some of it through that.
He's apparently he was so influential that like if you read his books after steeping yourself in some of this guy's writing, you'll see it'll just open up a whole new layer of books like The Crossing to you. Um, and now I'm such a philistine. I can't even remember the name of the guy. I'll have to send you the notes afterwards.
Yeah, I'll look him up. Do you, follow Christopher Sandbach?
Yeah, I do. He's a smart dude. A lot of what he says goes over my little brain too, but
Me too.
I enjoy him.
He posts every now and then that quote from The Crossing,
Which one
uh,
is that?
the wolf, um
The wolf came up from Mexico or whatever?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, and, he had a scabbed over wound because it's a very powerful line from Cormac McCarthy.
Um, I found that, uh, I gravitate towards Blood Meridian and No Country for Old Men, but I think the smartest people go for The Crossing, and I'm
Mhm.
not sure why that is, but I've noticed that, like, the people that know the most about him, um,
They say
really
is, like,
really
his best
revere
one.
The Crossing. Yeah, they say it's the best, that if you were, like, gonna if you were gonna get the acme of his style, the most, rarefied distillation of his style, that it would be The Crossing. Um,
I read that Border trilogy right after Blood Meridian, which was the
mhm.
first one I read, and I was so overwhelmed by Blood Meridian that I should have waited more time, I think, before
Yeah.
reading The Border, and then I read Suttree.
What'd you think of Suttree?
I So, my only problem with it is that I bought, apparently, a used copy from a female student. I don't think there was a single I think she just went through the whole thing and underlined it, and circled words, and, like, highlighted paragraphs randomly, and and there were notes scribbled on the side. I'm like, "This ruins," because I couldn't stay in it, but otherwise, I loved it. I loved that book.
There's Suttree is in my top 4, I'd say. There's a audiobook version by the actor Richard Poe, who I don't know if you've listened to these before, but they're I to my in my opinion, they're the best audiobooks ever produced. He has the best voice, and he does little like voices for the characters, which you you think might be cringe, but he does it subtly in a way where you're like, okay, that's kind of like a good indicator we've got a different character talking. He does black guys, he does Mexican women, he does all these different characters, and his Suttree is so good. I've read Suttree twice, but I've probably listened to the Richard Poe audiobook 10 times. Um, it's yeah, it's very good. I recommend if you've already read a book and you want to revisit it, audiobooks are a good way to do that. And yeah, the Richard Poe's
Okay.
Cormac McCarthy books. He's done Blood Meridian, he's done The Crossing, and he's done Suttree. I'm listening to The Crossing right now, and it's very good.
Okay, I'm gonna pick that up because I cannot reread that copy I have. I should throw it out.
It's funny that a woman read that book because that's the period of Cormac McCarthy's life when he was at his most debaucherous and womanizing, and
Oh,
It's a guy's book. Let's
she
just put it that
highlighted
way.
every,
R
questionable scene,
questionable passage of which there are
every
many.
and she, like, circled every N-word in the book, and, like,
Oh, man.
I don't know what she was doing, but, yeah, I'm gonna revisit it with the Richard Poe. That is a great idea.
Yeah.
So you're on the West Coast now, so you went from the East Coast to the West Coast? Not
Mhm.
to give out where you are or anything, but
That's okay, I'll tell you, I live outside San Diego.
okay.
My wife's from San Diego, and so this is where we ended up once we had our first baby on the way.
My wife and I lived in Rancho Santa Margarita for a year and a half.
I think we talked about that. That's up around Irvine.
Shoot. It's I don't even know where Irvine is, man.
Is it Orange County?
It is Orange County.
Okay. Yeah.
It's, like, under at the base of the Saddle Mountain there,
Okay.
and, it has a cool road that goes from it through the mountains to the other side, where that, like, contaminated lake is or whatnot. But we loved going down to San Diego, except for the traffic, and we have a really good family friend that is in, like, he has this house at the base of this mountain, far east of San Diego, and it is just dirt roads all the way there, and, like, he can see seemingly to the ocean, but he can't, and it
Yeah.
is like, it's just
That's, like, where my wife grew up.
okay.
My wife grew up, um, they had horses.
Man, it's so
They
cool.
had it was, not a rural place, but,
Mhm.
um, she has a funny story about, the only place where they could go to buy candy was a trailer park that had a, liquor store or something, and they would ride their horse down to buy Airheads or whatever at this store. This was in the early '90s. San Diego is not a San Diego County has a lot of, kind of wild places left in it.
I think it's Valley Center
Okay.
where yeah, it is just incredible, but yeah,
Yeah, that's a
I
cool place. I passed through there on the way out to Anza Borrego State Park.
yeah, I only went there once, my wife and I, but it was beautiful, and we were seemingly the only people in this entire massive state park.
In
Like
Anza Borrego?
yeah,
Yeah, there are places where you can go and, not have to worry about crowds.
yeah, it was like, we camped in the park.
Mhm,
It was so cool, bats flying overhead as the sun was setting. We built a little fire, I think, and, the only other person there was the host. It was
mhm.
like we were alone in the day. It was very, very cool.
Yeah,
I
and that's a
liked it.
place where they're really chill about doing backcountry camping without reservations. I hate any type of camping where you have to make a reservation. I mean, if it's a place like Yosemite where it's a once in a lifetime, you gotta go to it, like, whatever, I'll deal with that, but, it just sort of defeats the purpose to me to have to, like, make a reservation and worry about, like, am I gonna make it to the place in time for check-in? So I really appreciate places where you can camp without, having to make a reservation, and the backcountry camping there is really they've got a good road network, and it's just really chill. You just pull off the road and you can camp, within 40 feet of the road or whatever. No problems.
Yeah, my wife and I found a spot on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevadas near Lake Isabella,
Mhm.
and no reservation required. It was also an outdoor shooting range in
Interesting.
California, and so we would camp there. We'd be the only ones there too, and
Hmm.
that was incredible. I would shoot I think at the time my 30-round mag was illegal, but I don't care. I would take the AK up there and we just shoot into the bank, and it was man, that was really cool, and it was free, and it's like, "This is great."
For now, there are a lot. California's problems are well documented.
Mhm.
But for now, there's still quite a few places where you can shoot on BLM land. And I was talking to my brother who lives in Virginia still about this. And there's a trade off where you could, in some states, you can own an AR-15 that has doesn't have any of the BS that you have to deal with in California. But um, the only place to shoot is like a public range where there's going to be 200 people there on a Saturday. And it's like, would you rather have that or a place where there are fewer restrictions? There's more restrictions on gun ownership, but you can go out in the desert and shoot on BLM land without any BS. Um, I guess the ideal is a place like Arizona or Utah where you can have the best of both worlds. But
Even New Mexico. I mean, there's
yeah,
a 10-day wait period, but other than that, you can go shoot in most of the national forest and most of the BLM land. There's a public shooting range 25 minutes from my house. It's like, at the base of a mountain.
can you have a 30 round mag in New
Mhm,
Mexico? You
mhm.
can.
Yep. Well, hopefully, because I got 15 of them. But no, you can. You can. I bought them all here, so
Yeah.
most of them here. So, yeah, you can. Um, I I now belong to, like, a shooting range, a private shooting range,
Mhm.
but
That's what
yeah.
happened to we used to go to a shooting range in Virginia. It was a really cool outdoor range. The the ladies, to give you an idea of this place, they had a big wood burning stove in the lobby, or like it was like a little cabin that you like the guy had built from a kit. You know, they used to sell mail
Oh,
order
yeah.
like log cabin kits.
Sears kit.
Yeah. And that was kind of the nucleus of the range and where you checked in and everything. And they had a wood burning stove, and it smelled so good in there in the winter. And that wood burning stove always felt good to go in there. And the ladies' room was used so infrequently that it was like blocked off with, like, if you tried to open the door, there were bags of grass seed and fertilizer like blocking your way in. Like I took a girlfriend there once in college, and she like couldn't get into the ladies' room, and the guy was like apologetic and had to move like the mower or whatever was in there around. Um, but now that place is like some kind of club that you have to pay $4,000 a year to be a member there. Everything has just gotten so expensive and bougie. I don't know.
Whoa. That's awful.
Yeah. If you can go to a place and shoot on BLM land, let me tell you, brothers, like we gotta protect that. Like all that selling off the public land that happened last year when we all chimped out about that, that was good. That I felt like that was democracy in action. Being able to shoot on BLM land is a nice thing, and we got to keep it as long as we can.
Oh, yeah, that's still my most viewed tweet when I was like, "No, we're not selling this."
That was
You
a
would
good
be
one.
amazed how many freaking people responded in the negative. Like,
Yeah,
have you ever been outside?
that whole that whole fracas was just so stupid. I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea of them selling some federal land. I think the idea of that was like they were going to sell the Presidio and or like the Air Force Base that's in Mountain View, California, like places close to the cities. They were going to sell, um, but not like like some of those parcels were like obviously not places where you're going to put houses. Like I've been to some of those places, and they were like 40 miles, literally 40 miles from pavement, and the groundwater is poison. Like, like it was just ridiculous. They're really trying
From
to pull the wool over our eyes on
yeah,
that one.
from my house, I'm looking at public land. It's public
Mhm.
land all the way to Kirtland Air Force Base, so they're like all whole mountains.
Okay.
That was slided slated? That was slated for sale.
Hmm.
And I was like, "No, you are not." First of all, there's no water. Our
Yeah.
well is 800 feet deep, and we're one of the only houses left that doesn't have to truck in water because it's so deep.
Hmm.
Like, so I'm glad that we chimped out and we hopefully got that. I don't wanna say stalled. I wanna say stopped, but
Well,
possibly just stalled.
there was a book. John McPhee wrote a book, Encounters with the Arch Druid, about, I think it was the guy who founded the Sierra Club, back when the Sierra Club used to be a very different organization.
Mhm.
And this guy was, he was a committed environmentalist. He lived a simple life, and people would say like, "Do you want to have like lower economic growth and fewer immigrants, and keep this land?" And he'd say, "Yeah, I take that trade off. Like, I'll be poorer so that I can go." and enjoy the woods. But I remember he had a quote there where he said, "Look, I always feel like I'm losing because the developers, they only have to win once and then the land is developed, but I have to win every single time. So we gotta stay on our toes about that because they'll come back for it."
They will. It's just incredibly short-sighted.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, let's just say we get the deportations we want and self deportations, then all of those houses and apartments they were going to build will sit empty,
Yeah.
and somebody would have made a buck, probably elected, and then they sit empty, and or we fill them with people we don't want here.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah,
I think that was a rare issue where, do you ever follow Ken Lane? Do you listen to Desert Oracle or
I do not, but I keep writing stuff down as you're talking because I'm like,
check
oh,
him
I'll
out?
look into
I'm
that.
pretty sure Ken is very liberal. Like he worked for or he founded Politico or not
Oh,
Politico. No, it was one of the Gawker network uh, websites about politics. And I'm sure he's very liberal, but he's like an older Gen X guy, and I think doesn't he's not on board with the latest stuff. Um, and he wrote very powerfully about the land grab last year, and I feel like he kind of understood that there was a lot. That was a big tent. There was a lot of people who didn't have much in common who were united that uh, this land, this deal to sell off all the BLM land was a bad idea. And that gave me some optimism for the future that there were, you know, liberals and conservatives were agreeing about something.
well, I think probably the liberals have been more conservative about the land until recently,
Mhm.
and I like to see that because I think the right needs to whatever that is, needs to understand, and I think that we are coming around, especially, I'm in the OGC, especially our president. He
Mhm.
he will fight to the death on keeping this land public, and so will I. I mean, definitely.
Yeah, I think
Um,
there's like an earlier generation of Republicans that they would have said like, "Oh yeah, if we can make a buck off this, let's sell it off."
I
And
mean,
there's an earlier version of myself, I think, that would have been more amenable to that. But you hear about people talking about Texas, and Texas is a beautiful state. I don't want to impugn anybody's Texan honor here, but apparently, like in Texas, if you live in Austin and you want to go someplace uh, where there's open land where you can just camp wherever, you pretty much have to drive like 6 hours to Big Bend. Um, there's everything is privatized there. It's all ranch gates everywhere you go, and you don't have there's not as much public land in Texas. I think
it's
America
true.
I think America has to be we've got to have some part of this country be so big that it feels like if you go out there on a Tuesday, like a random Tuesday when most people are working, it feels like the year 1900. You know,
Mhm.
you feel like you have your own. Feel like you have your own, 10,000 acre spread, and I think we need to be a country that's big enough that people can feel that sense of possibility in that open space. I think
I agree.
we'll really lose something if there's for sale signs everywhere. I'm otherwise like pretty pro market, but not
I
enough to
100% agree.
yeah.
There's multiple places in New Mexico and even southern Colorado where I go either with my dog or my friend, soon with my, 8-month-old once he gets old enough, where I'm the only one there.
Yeah,
I am the only one on the entire mountain,
yeah.
and and if there are other people, I don't see or hear them, which is great. Right.
The people that really respect that are the Europeans. I have a friend who's English who he says, you don't know how good you have it to be able to go out someplace, drive an hour and not see about, literally 200 people within a couple hundred yards of you. They have
Well,
parks and stuff there in England, but they're very crowded.
most of my, adult most of the friends I've made as like a late 20-year-old into my 30s were French people.
Mhm.
It's a long story, but it was I lived in Wisconsin for 8 years, and I met one French person, and then I met 30.
Okay.
And a lot of them, not a lot, like 4 or 5 of them are still in the States.
Mhm.
They got married, and they're here now. And one of them is the guy that told me to start a podcast. Uh, he lives on a lake. He goes hunting and fishing almost every week. Oh, no, definitely every week. And he and my other French friends, they said the same exact thing. Like, you
Mhm.
don't, there is nothing like this in France. Like, even in Wisconsin, I, they come out to the West. My buddy and his wife and 2 daughters come out and stay with us every year. And it's just paradise. They're like, this is amazing. And I'm like, yeah, we have it very lucky here, and we got to keep it that way.
Mhm.
Well, Bandy, this was awesome. We got to do it again.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and there's, how much time you got? You got another 5 minutes?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I said before the call, I wanna talk about, uh,
Oh
the
yeah.
Civil War in the West, and I wanna talk about cannibalism among
Man
American
corn.
Indians. Yeah, and so I listened to some of your episode about the Chaco Canyon and the Mancorn, and from what you know, what tribes in the Southwest practiced cannibalism for sustenance as opposed to like there was a lot of like among Indian tribes there's a lot of ritual eating of body parts for enemies killed in battle and stuff. Not talking about that. I'm talking about like like straight up eating bodies because there wasn't anything else to eat.
So the book Man Corn by uh, by Christie, he I don't remember the number exactly. Almost none in the Four Corners area. There is almost no body that has been recovered, and there are actually quite a few that show cannibalism
Mhm,
that was not ritualistic in its how they ate them.
mhm,
Because they would when you eat someone, okay, when you need to eat someone, you eat like the meaty parts that you need.
mhm,
I don't want to get too gross. And then you bury the body or you leave it there or whatever you got to do.
mhm,
You don't take every single bone apart, strip that bone, and then leave the bones in a pile. You don't eat the people and then go into their living room and take a dump and
mhm,
then burn the house down. And then we find the fossilized dump and then
mhm.
we run tests and it's human remains from a human. That's just not stuff you do when you're eating for sustenance, like to survive.
Right.
So almost none of the many, many, many bodies recovered that are sitting in various museum warehouses or that haven't been returned, they almost all show ritualistic aspects.
Interesting. I, like a lot of people, really enjoyed that movie Bone Tomahawk,
Mhm,
the Zoller
mhm.
movie, and after I watched that for the first time, ChatGPT was in its infancy, and I asked it, "Were there any Indian tribes that ate humans like this?" And uh, it gave me this lecture about how could you even ask such a thing, um, but it never gave me a straight answer,
No.
and for obvious reasons, people are. I think people who are researchers, they by nature don't want to speculate too much just because they're precise people, but they're also worried about um, anything that would cast Native Americans in a bad light. Um,
And that's what was great about Christy Turner's book,
mhm,
Mancorn, because he didn't care.
yeah,
He got ostracized. He got, lampooned. I mean, but he didn't care. And now it's all, now you can't hide, they can't hide it anymore.
yeah,
I mean, when the Spanish were here in New Mexico and Arizona, well, mostly only New Mexico, but the Pueblo revolt happened. They got kicked out. When they came back in, the Hopis, there was still they had 4 mesas at the time, and Awatowi Mesa. They were the only Catholic mesa. So there's like the finger mesas, and Awatobi was Catholic. It's the one furthest east.
Mhm.
Well, the Hopis got together one night, literally, and we're like, "Hey, we need to get rid of these Catholic witches over at that Awatobi Mesa." So they killed everyone on the mesa,
Hmm.
killed them, burned them, or forced them off of the mesa side, like,
Pushed him off a cliff?
pushed them off a cliff.
Huh.
They then went to the base of the cliff and ate everyone that they pushed off.
That's hardcore.
Yeah.
I
And
feel like
then they
there's
left the bones for later archaeologists to find. And then the Hopis never reoccupied Awatobi Mesa.
huh.
It's hardcore.
Those civil I mean, there's, uh there's a lifetime worth of reading and traveling that you can do just where you are in New Mexico. I don't think people realize how old that society is and how many stories there are there. Like, wars and invasions and counter invasions and like the Spanish history, is as old as the Anglo history in the North America, older,
100 years
uh,
older. Yeah.
100 years older. Uh, yeah, I got to spend more time in New Mexico.
Well, you got a place to stay. You can bring
I
the whole
appreciate
family.
it. And I've got a guide too. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yep.
We'll do
Yep.
it someday.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was great. We have to do it again. Um, we'll find some more topics to talk about because this was easy. This was fun.
Well, I thank you for. I really am appreciative that you would, take the time to read my book. I know that people have not a lot of time to read these days, and so if you pick it up like and enjoyed it, that was means a lot to me. So thank you for having me on the program and let me say my mind.
Hmm. And I'm gonna obviously post this everywhere, and I'm gonna post links to the book. It's only digital copy right now, but it's worth reading. You can do it in one day. You should, because it's like a movie, a
Yeah.
very well written movie, very action packed. There's even an almost scalping incident in it.
Yep. I work in that homage to our Western past in there.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, thank you, Bandy, and I will talk to you again soon.
Okay, let's do it again.
All right.